throughout history, one facet of what it means to be human that has often been highlighted throughout the church is that we are spiritual beings. And while spirituality in the most holistic sense is going to involve everything about us, certainly it does traditionally also include prayer, Bible reading and reflection and response, reflection on life, examination of life, practices like fasting, silence, social justice. There's all kinds of different practices that are thought of often as a spiritual discipline or a spiritual practice. This semester, we are going to use Peter Scazerro's text, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality Day by Day, a 40-day journey with the daily office, as a way together to engage some of these practices, in a sense communally, even though we'll all kind of be doing them weekly at our own, or daily at our own times, but we'll do it communally, and that we'll all go through this text together. So it's the first week. During the first week here, I've invited you to read his introduction. It's a fine introduction to what the daily office is. Historically, the daily office has been with us since the very earliest days of the church. The apostles would have just followed the Jewish tradition of praying, as the Psalms refer to, morning and evening, or morning, noon, and evening, or 7 times a day. That developed into a Jewish practice of particular hours, particular kind of stretches of time throughout the day that people would stop and pray and then re-engage whatever activities they were involved with. So our Christian sisters and brothers of the faith, who were Jewish initially, of course, continued that practice, and then it developed with its own Christian flavor throughout the centuries. Peter does a really good job of introducing the practice and the way he has set it up for us to do together. He lays out nicely in the introduction to this book. So that will help you sort of know what's coming. But I just want to also highlight, it basically has several different elements. For each day, Monday through Friday during a week, there are 2 sections that are outlined for you and kind of you're guided through these 2 different times of prayer during the day. And each of those sections consists of some practice of silence and stillness, prayer, scripture reading, reflection questions, and also reading of what you might call spiritual text, classic Christian spiritual texts or contemporary texts. Some of Peter's own reflections and thinking are included in those. So you'll see that's how each of those sections twice a day is set up. I've asked you to minimally do 1. Ideally, you would do 2, and he has it set up that you would do it morning and then a second one in the afternoon or evening. That said, I understand everybody's life rhythms are different, so I'm asking you minimally to do 1 of them, and you can choose either. If you're only going to do 1 a day, you could choose either the morning one or the afternoon, evening set of reflections and the guide for that day. If you can do it twice a day, I would encourage you to do it. We'll be doing it together as a class for 8 weeks. So basically over the first 2/3 of the semester, we'll engage in this. And I invite you during the forums and other interactions that we have together, Zoom, whatever, in class, to certainly offer how that's going for you, and we can take some time to reflect on that. But what I suspect will be the most challenging for many of us is the practice of silence. We have very little silence. Most of us have very little silence in our lives, let alone in our practice of being with God. And the point of silence and stillness in Christian practice is a little bit different than, say, traditional Eastern meditation practice, which in that idea, usually in that practice, is to kind of empty your thoughts. In Christian practice, while you do want to just allow your thoughts to kind of settle down, the point of that is so that you can be attentive to God in ways that are more difficult when we're engaged in other things. Multitasking is one thing. Focusing on tasks one at a time, you have a different kind of attention that you're able to give. So silence and stillness with God is a way of basically I say just because it's not always easy, but sitting ourselves down, being still, and remember that God is God, and trusting that we don't have to have an agenda for every minute that we're in God's presence, that we're actually invited to simply, and it's not always simple, to simply be still and allow our hearts to settle down, allow God to settle us. and just to rest in God's presence. So that'll be part of the practice that we're going to do together as a class. So I hope you enjoy this. I think you're going to really enjoy some of the spiritual readings, as well as the scriptures and reflection questions and prayers. This is not meant to be a straitjacket by any means. Again, all of us pray differently, we engage with scripture differently, but this way of doing this has for 2 millennia now, almost 2 millennia, for many, many Christians, is a very fruitful way of engaging in these practices that are important to us as persons of Christian faith. That said, I don't expect that everybody is going to resonate with every part of this. That's okay. I need you to not be worried about that. But the invitation is for you for 7 or 8 weeks to engage in these practices. We'll do it together. And for example, during our Zoom meetings, and certainly we can also do it in forum settings, we can kind of encourage each other and talk a little bit about how these practices are going for us. So I hope you enjoy this engagement with this text and these practices, and of course, most importantly, your engagement with God through these modes of attention. And I hope it provides us a fruitful way to be together communally, even though we're in all different places. So that's the intent of that assignment. I hope that you can come to it as open-heartedly as you can. Just invite the Lord to lead you in whatever it is the Lord has for that time that you spend in this way with God. God's blessings on you, and I hope you enjoy these practices.